don't need a high-end designer or a lot of money to get a luxe look. Be your own interior designer.
This is Affordable Interior Design, the podcast.
Here's your host, Betsy Helmuth.
Cara, you write from Salt Lake City. Thank you for your podcast. You're totally my decorating guru. Another reason to love Cara. Here's my question. How do you choose drapery, color, and or pattern? Thanks. All right, so it's drapery day here at Affordable Interior Design. No, just this part of the segment, right? I choose drapery after I've designed the entire room. Very rarely does the drapery serve as my inspiration piece. Inspiration piece being the multicolored piece from which I'm going to derive the color palette for the room, in which case I need to find it or decide it in the middle of my design process. But very rarely do I design a whole room around the drapes because there's not really all that many pattern drapes that I find that compelling. And also, drapes get faded a lot in the sun. And so there's something that you may want to change out a little more regularly than, say, a piece of art or a very large rug. Also, a piece of art or a very large rug is typically an easier inspiration piece to use because there's more selection. As I mentioned before, pattern drapes that are super interesting and compelling are few and far between. And also, when the drape is pushed to the side, as it so often will be, when it's pushed to the side, you can't even really get a sense of the colors or of the pattern because it's all smushed together. So you only get little peaks, but you don't actually get the full dose, unlike a rug, which is always unfurled, or artwork that is always in its full glory, right? So those are the reasons that I typically use drapes to kind of complete the picture, but it doesn't drive the design. So when I'm picking drapes, I'll design the whole room first, all the core pieces, pick the color palette, then I'll drop it in my mood board after I've gotten 90% of the things selected. And I'll ask myself, what does this room need? Does it need another pattern, or do I already have 2 to 3 patterns in this room? Does it need a dose of color, or are the walls colorful? If the walls are a green or a blue or a yellow or an orange or a red, well, I may not want to compete against that color with another color. And I certainly wouldn't want to compete with a solid. I've got a solid color wall right there, and then I put a solid panel in front of it. I mean, I'm not saying I haven't done it. In fact, I did it in my daughter's room. But it's just not something I always or typically do. So typically I do choose a drape that has some sort of pattern. Typically. It could be like a tone on tone, like a trellis pattern, or like a linear pattern. Sometimes I'll even do like an ombre or a color blocked drape. And then typically, I just kind of look at the mood board and ask myself what's missing. Because the exciting thing about drapes, especially if you're going for something rather simplistic, something that doesn't have a lot of pattern or color, something that's tone on tone, something that might be a solid, but maybe it's a super interesting fabric, like an open weave linen that almost has a textural pattern, right? So in that case, I can have lots of selection. And I can just Google, quite literally put into my search engine, grommet panel, because I love me some grommet panels if you've read my book, grommet panel, blue stripe. Or the other day, I was designing this little boy's room and I put grommet panel, yellow ombre blackout. And I found just what I was hoping for. So, if you don't ask, you won't receive, right? And so I ask the universe, and by universe, I mean Google, for exactly what is missing in the room. I don't mince words. And if that exact item doesn't come up for me, then I change my idea or I change my wording. Like instead of grommet panel, yellow ombre blackout, I might do grommet panel gold ombre blackout. Like, let's just see what happens. Or grommet panel wheat, right? Depending on sort of the shade that I'm going for. But that gives you some sort of places to start. But 90% of the time, I'll be doing a grommet panel for the aforementioned reasons. And if you want even more reasons why I like grommet panels, you need to get my book. But then also, I just fill in the blanks. What is missing here? And bear in mind, not every window needs drapes. So sometimes there are circumstances where I will just do a blind. There have even been times when I've left, I got to breathe in and out, a naked window. Very rarely, but sometimes I don't do drapes or blinds. So you'll want to really analyze the window and ask yourself what not only the room needs, but what's best for your window. A big thank you to Aton and the Embassy who wrote our theme song. A shout out to Catherine Heller who owns the podcast shop and is our editor extraordinaire. We also want to thank Ginny Sunasan and her team at the Savvy Podcast Agency for their help with our social, our YouTube channel, and so much more. We also want to thank Uploft, which is our parent company who supports this podcast. And lastly, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to you. Thank you so much for tuning in and for all your support.